Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. If you're watching this video and you're a Palantir shareholder that's been around for a while, this is going to be a very rewarding video. And the reason I'm saying this is because if you're new to Palantir, this video might not be that interesting or exciting or really rewarding to your soul. But if you've been with Palantir at least before February 2022, you probably remember one of the most famous people on Wall Street that, whether you like it or not, makes headlines, gets the clicks, everyone cares about what she's doing, Cathie Wood. She bought 37 million shares of Palantir all throughout 2021, and in February 2022, she liquidated all 37 million shares. It was pretty tough for a lot of Palantir bulls because whether we care about what Cathie thinks or not, it still kind of hurts, right? Because Cathie is one of those big names on Wall Street. Palantir, she liquidated around $12, went all the way down to $6 about 8 months later. And then obviously in 2023 had its massive run up to, at one point, $20, right now in the $14 range. Now, Cathie Wood bought back in after their first quarter results in 2023 when they reported that they were GAAP profitable. This is when they spiked from around $7.42 in May to about $9. And that's when Palantir was acquired by Cathie Wood again, and she started buying here and there, getting excited about the company, thinking that maybe there is a change, maybe there's a difference. For a lot of us Palantir shareholders, we were like, really? GAAP profitability? For a growth stock investor who doesn't care about profitability, was GAAP profitability the thing that really changed your mind? And for the past couple months, we haven't heard a single word or peep from Cathie or from the ARK team for why they are back into Palantir until today. Cathie Wood's team just recently did a ARK webinar podcast, and in that ARK webinar, they talked for 4 minutes about why they sold Palantir. We finally got some broader clarity on why they sold Palantir. They mentioned it a long time ago, but it was kind of in passing. Why they got back into Palantir and why they're excited for the future of Palantir. So these 4 minutes, shout out to Ahad on Twitter for sending me this. Look, as a Palantir shareholder that's been here for a couple years now, I mean, it was really, really just rewarding to hear, why she's into it, why she's not into it. I'm not saying Cathie's the end all be all. I know a lot of people have thoughts about her, but just listening to how they talk about the future of Palantir, where they see the trajectory, why they think a lot of the things that Palantir has been building over the past couple of years is going to be instrumental in them taking advantage of the AI opportunity that, by the way, ARK thinks is going to be like $80 trillion of GDP growth or something in the next 10 years. I don't know if that's going to happen, but they're very bullish on AI. It was pretty cool to see. So before we get into that, let me just show you what happened yesterday. The breaking news was that Cathie Wood bought 1,029,332 shares of Palantir in the ARK KK, ARK F, and ARK W ETFs. Palantir fell 5.73% on the day, closing at $13.90. Right now in the pre-markets, I'm recording this at about 4:38 a.m. It's back in the $14 range, $14.10. Palantir, 744,000 shares in the ARK KK fund. And then we got 150,000 shares in the ARK F fund. And then we have 134,000 shares in the ARK W fund. So Cathie Wood did buy the dip. I had a feeling she was going to buy Palantir, and the fact that they bought 1 million shares of this bad boy, basically they spent close to $14 million, a little bit more than that, yesterday, just on one ticker. They're starting to definitely develop a much larger position in the company and get ready for it as it goes further into its trajectory and life cycle. All right, here you go. Here are the 4 minutes of ARK's team talking about why they invested back into Palantir.
And this goes back to you, Frank. What are your latest thoughts on Palantir, a name we frequently get questions about?
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. Happy to shed some more light here. So investors may have noticed that we moved away from Palantir after hearing about the government moving away from what are called sole source contracts. When Palantir first came to market, they were really the only option for some of the modern data-based operating systems that the government was looking for. And so they won these sole source contracts that gave them kind of prime positioning and accelerated deals in the government space. For fear of relying too much on a single vendor, the government has been cautious about continuing those sole source contracts. And that caused us to have caution in the name. But we stayed in touch and continued watching. And we think some of those fears around sole source contracts are abating. In particular, we've heard anecdotes that the commanders in charge that are actually using Palantir's software products understand their value proposition and know that they're still quite differentiated. And we also like the company's direction in terms of navigating this environment where they're increasingly offering products and services for newer technology companies to build on top of Palantir and almost use Palantir as a service in serving to fulfill government contracts. So we think that de-risks the opportunity there. The second part, and this is what's most important, I think, is that we think they're really well set up to take advantage of the generative AI opportunity. And this comes from a variety of products they've been building over the years that really seem like they were laying the groundwork for deploying AI at scale within an enterprise. So Foundry is one of those, for example, which seeks to connect the disparate data stores within a company and the different systems, categorize into what's called an ontology, both the nature of that data and how it interacts across different workflows in an organization, and the ability to get a kind of bird's eye view, top-down digital twin look at an organization, its data, and its processes, and use that view to create automations that can not just analyze data and produce insights, but also take action based on those insights. And that framework happens to be exactly what you need, that scaffolding to plug something like a large language model into a workflow to allow the automation of steps that maybe couldn't have been automated before, or to increase accuracy or accelerate certain existing processes. So they've been quick to market and launching what they call AIP, their AI platform, which builds on top of this concept of an ontology. To create use cases that actually have really quick time to value at some of their customers, building chatbots that are handling customer service requests just in a matter of weeks, that customers are finding really great value in. So those are some of the reasons we've become more constructive on the name, and why you'll see it in portfolios including ARKK, ARKW, and ARKF. Last thing I would highlight is that we also recently recorded a podcast with Palantir's CTO, Shyam Sankar, talking about all of this and their positioning in AI and thoughts for the future in much more detail. That's coming out on Thursday, September 28th. So I would definitely encourage any listener wanting to learn more about what Palantir is up to tune into that podcast.
Yeah, if I could just add in there, it was Frank and I did the podcast together, and it was excellent. It added new dimensions to my understanding of Palantir and AI generally. So highly recommend it.
Okay. I actually, when I listened to this before I did the video, I didn't hear that little last 10-second snippet from Cathie. I didn't even know she was on this webinar. I just heard the snippet from one of the people on our team. So a lot of interesting stuff there. Okay, so let me address the last thing they said real quick, then we'll get to the top. Palantir, Shyam Sankar, CTO, is doing an interview with ARK, did it with Cathie Wood. Very interesting that it's being released on the 28th of September. On the 20th of September, we're supposed to figure out if they get the NHS deal, which is about 6 days away. I don't know. I'm not the biggest expert on government procurement and if these deals actually match with the timelines that they post on their website. So they said the 28th they'll announce it. Will we actually get it on the 28th? I have no idea. But we will get this new podcast on the 28th. So it'll be kind of cool if we get the NHS deal and the podcast on the 28th, and we'll see what happens. But that'll be awesome. Shyam Sankar, CTO, Palantir, giving Cathie Wood a deeper understanding of AI. And look, Cathie studies this space. You can agree or disagree with her, but she studied it pretty extensively, and she's got billions of dollars of trust behind her knowledge around AI. So it's interesting that Shyam Sankar was able to further develop her conviction. And look, now that Shyam did an interview with Cathie and they actually got to know each other and like they're talking, and this is the second rodeo she's having with Palantir, I think it's less likely that she's going to sell out of Palantir, unless, the thesis breaks, but more likely the thesis is getting deeper and deeper, and she's starting to really understand the company at a broader level. Okay, so addressing what he said from the top, they left because of sole source contracting. So sole source contracting versus single source contracting in the government is basically, single source means there's multiple competitors, right? So there's you can pick this single source or that single source or that single source for the contract. Sole source is there is no competitors. There's just you are the sole source to be able to apply for a contract. Palantir won 3 contracts in June of 2023 this year that were sole source contracts, about $118 million worth of those contracts. However, back in 2022, ARK thought that a lot of the government was becoming a multi-vendor sourced institution, and as a result of that, they weren't going to be buying Palantir, and that was their core reason for selling out. And even Brett Winton, the chief futurist of ARK, went on Meet Kevin's show and said that's kind of the core disagreement they have with the Palantir thesis right now, is that if government revenue dries up, which at that point was 60% of revenues because the government wants different vendors, then it would be a bad thing for Palantir's growth curve and a major headwind for them to be able to undercover. What they're learning now is that not only does Palantir have a moat and is differentiated in the government space, they've spoken to and they've gotten anecdotes from people like commanders, generals that are using the software that have reaffirmed to them why they use the software, how they use the software, and how differentiated they think the software is from other types of software. And I believe that's given them the thesis ultimately to believe that even if the government chooses to be a more multi-vendor sourced kind of institution when it comes to procuring software, Palantir is probably going to be at the top of that list. The stuff they're doing in AI is going to give them a really competitive chance to win a lot of these contracts. And at the end of the day, if the people that are on the battlefield are using their software and telling you, the investor, that this is all we use, this is all we want to use, we really don't see the need for anything else, it kind of makes you wonder, like, well, do we really think there's this massive competitive wave coming out of private startups and other, public companies that are really going to take Palantir's lunch in the government space? And if that's not going to happen, then the thesis for government seems like it's only going to get bigger and better as the government chooses to modernize and defense spending chooses to go further into software in order to compete with China and Russia in regards to AI, which is what Alex Karp has been talking about for a long time. So I think that part makes a lot of sense. And at least we got some more clarity on why they sold out back in 2022. Not the worst reason, but it makes sense for why they're getting back in and why their thesis has been reaffirmed, given these anecdotes from people using the software. Second thing they talked about is FedStart. So when they said products and services that people will be able to use Palantir's platform as a service, because they said this right after the government point before they got into the whole AI commercial argument, I think they're talking about FedStart, and I think this makes a lot of sense. FedStart is Palantir's offering to basically say, hey, new venture-backed startups that are in the defense technology space, which, by the way, the United States has investing, or in general, venture capital has done $17 billion of private equity funding in defense tech startups. This is a space that's hot. This is a space that's growing. In 2019, we had, I think, a couple $1 billion worth of funding for defense tech startups, and last year it was 34 billion. This year it's already 17 billion, and we have 4 more months left to go in the year. So it's getting to the point where people are starting to recognize, especially in the VC world, hey, this is a massive opportunity for companies that are helping protect governments not only get better and modernize in the world of AI, machine learning, etc., but also have a competitive edge on the battlefield and within their own governmental services, like making the tax system more effective. I mean, there's so many different use cases for how the government could adopt technology. And because defense tech in particular is starting to pick up more funding, the question becomes, how do you get $45 million of funding as a private tech startup in the defense tech space and not be able to have the certifications to sell to the biggest client, which is the US government, the DoD? You need certain certifications. You need certain guide rails. You need certain access controls that allow you to actually have the chance to sell your product. And what Palantir is saying with FedStart is, we've done all that for 20 years. We've been through the lobbying. We've been through the hard stuff. We've sued the army. We went through all this stuff. Why don't we just give you a service, and you can pay us a flat fee, a consulting fee, a service fee. You can use our actual platform, Foundry, which is IL6 certified. So now you can not only pay us for the consulting, which would be very, minimal, it'd be like $1 million, $2 million, but you can actually use our software. This is where the real 80% margins would come in. And our software can containerize your software so that it is secure, accredited, and you actually have the ability to sell to the government. I think what ARK is saying here is that this idea of offering products and services to leverage Palantir as a service/platform to be able to sell to the government, if you believe the government defense tech space is only growing, which the numbers, and Palantir put out a great article last week explaining why the numbers are growing, are showing that it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It makes a lot of sense for that part of the thesis to actually work out. And we don't know what the numbers look like from FedStart, but one could argue that those numbers are going to be strong because Palantir is only one of 3 companies in the world that even has IL level 6 certification. So when it comes to a startup that needs that level of securitization or accreditation to be able to sell to the government, they would have to be able to call a company like Palantir to help them out. Finally, the AI play. So the last thing that they say on the interview is that essentially AIP seems like it makes a lot of sense. And I think, a lot of people are starting to recognize the value of AIP, which is AI infrastructure to securely train and model and allow an LLM to be productive for the organization. So what they talk about here is that Palantir is really capitalizing on the AI opportunity, and their go-to-market has been incredibly quick, which I agree. It's been, 15 weeks since they announced AIP, and now have 150 customers actively using it. And CodeStrap clarified on Twitter, you can't have a client using AIP if you don't have Foundry, period. So AIP, even if it's not being monetized, it's selling them more Foundry because you have to have an ontology of your data in order for AIP to be able to connect to it to then allow the LLM to have the context of reality of your organization so they can give productive results, which is what makes the clients even happy with AIP in the first place, right? If it was giving bad results, you wouldn't be happy with it. So what they're saying here is that Foundry has been one of the things that Palantir has been developing for a decade now, and that put them in the prime position to be able to launch AIP. And this makes a lot of sense given what Sham said on an interview a month ago, where he said, the reason we were so excited in December of 2022 is because we immediately recognized why LLMs were valuable for the enterprise, but more importantly, what would be needed for those LLMs to actually offer value to the enterprise. And what's needed for an LLM, a large language model, to make sense of all your data and then give you the right answers, which leads to the increase in productivity per employee of an organization, is an ontology, is a better understanding of your data, is a structured understanding of your data, is a object-oriented relationship spreadsheet, not just a regular spreadsheet of your emails and transcripts and parts and supply chains. If you can put all that together in something that makes sense versus just a blank spreadsheet where you're trying to understand, hey, how does column A relate to column B, but rather column A is talking to column B when you have an ontology, and as a result of that, the LLM can actually find the relationship between column A and column B, it's going to give you better answers. And it's going to train the model to become more effective. And I think what ARC is recognizing here is okay, if we believe LLMs are the future, we believe that every organization in the world, NGO, government, nonprofit, commercial enterprise, government subsidiary, government agency that works on the battlefield, any of these organizations are going to need LLMs. They're going to need an ontology. So Palantir's pre-existing software, their bread and butter, which has been Foundry, that has been really what got them on the map and what they've developed for a decade, and what Karp said recently, that companies would have to spend 5 or 6 years to develop something like Foundry, whereas we can just keep enhancing it and making it better. That's going to be the thing that sells. AIP is the upsell. AIP is the thing that really adds a lot of value to your organization because you have Foundry. And as a result of that, what company is better suited to take on the technological revolution that is AI and LLMs for the enterprise, other than the company that's been building the foundation of what makes the thing that everyone's so excited for, which are LLMs, for the past 20 years? It seems like it's Palantir. And they give the example with chatbots being implemented into an organization almost immediately, whether it's on the consumer end or the enterprise end, because that chatbot can interact with the user or with the consumer, given there is an understanding of the data of the organization. So the chatbot can effectively pull from the right answers, or pull from the right context of the data to give the right answers. And that's because they have something like Foundry set up. So overall, I think Cathie's thesis makes a lot of sense. They understand what's going on in the government space. They see the massive opportunity in the commercial AI enterprise space. They explain their reasoning for why they left. They're explaining their reasoning for ultimately why they've come back. And it seems like they've done an interview with the CTO of Palantir, the man behind all the technology, Sham Sankar, that gave them a broader, deeper context for understanding where AI is, where it's going, and why solutions that Palantir is building, that really, I think one of the most important things they said, that they built very quickly. Their go-to-market has been incredibly quick in terms of turnaround. And then in terms of offering time to value for customers, they've been able to do that because they're on the cutting edge of this and they were ready for this moment. It is theirs to capture. It is now just a question of if they're going to be able to figure it out. And as a result of that, Cathie Wood has been buying shares hand over fist because she is starting to believe again in the thesis of Palantir. That's it. This is one of those videos that was very, very rewarding for me as a long-term investor, and I'm sure for a lot of people that have been here throughout the entire Cathie Wood's buying and selling and buying back again saga. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you think. Thanks so much for listening, watching, and I'll see you in the next one.